What's going on, everybody? This is James Grandmaster Facts Boys, and you're here for another episode of the Facts Project. Today, special guest, longtime friend, because we've all obviously had time to communicate. We've obviously done business together as far as like some of the guests that we've had on here on the Facts Project before. I bring to you Jeff Haas. We are here to talk about Terminus. Thank you for being here.
Oh, it's totally my pleasure. It's an honor to be on the show. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So when we're talking about this, of course, you've had the opportunity to be a publicist and be at a help to a lot of people in the indie comic community. But when it comes to your own project, what made you want to put this project together?
A lot of people who are creatives or do a lot of writing, sometimes an idea just kind of hits you and it won't let go.
Mm.
And it was one of those projects that when it popped into my brain, it kind of started taking on a life of its own. I couldn't just drop it, even though I had another project I actually was working on at the time. I quit that project, like this is the one that's not occupying my brain. And
Mm.
I felt like if I didn't write it down, it would never let go of it. I had to write it.
That's understood. And of course, with Traversing the Stars, your podcast, and I always feel like your specific genre of choice would be sci-fi.
Hmm.
Why
It,
is that?
you know, I'm just a nerd. The nice thing about sci-fi is that it has infinite possibilities. It has a scope and an imagination attached to it that no other genre can quite reach. And I grew up on Star Trek and Star Wars, and you kind of when that's in your blood, you kind of just want to touch upon it and try to do your kind of knit your own little piece of that genre. And this is mine that I'm trying to take a like a little notch into.
Yeah, you almost sound like the subtext of your book, because that almost sounded like in the beginning, like the subtext in the beginning of the book, the infinite possibilities, the
Hmm.
infinite tiering. So when we're talking about Terminus, at most, it derives from the arc concept of like basically seven sentient species, 50,000 individuals on one ship, because the literally the universe is being ripped apart.
Right.
Now that sequence in a whole, um, when you bring up the arc concept, like where did that derive from?
I kind of thought to myself about human society, and anything good that's in sci-fi is usually a reflection of us on some level.
Hmm.
And I try to thought of different parts of society and different parts of what our future could look like, and I created species that kind of reflect those aspects. An aspect of our barbarian, let's say a primal aspect of the word I'm apparently stuttering over. I'm looking at technology with the link, the peaceful idea of what we could be from a society with Salah and the Laurelians. Um, and I kind of and there's like say I call them the space Christians as well are kind of in
I
there.
see that because you kind of yeah, you kind of have everybody there. You have people of the faith, which is basically the what is it, the acolytes of the devout,
Yep,
and you have the I guess the people of brute force, the Getagatians,
yep,
who are more of a primal species than anything. You,
yep.
you have humans on on the ship. You also have Beta and Alpha.
Yeah, a bit about it. They're clones of each other. They live in a society that's all clones, even though only two are on the ship. Basically, if they were ever to get to where their home would be,
Mhm.
they would clone the rest of the population, which is all them anyway, identical aspects of their species. And they're very much a collective society in that nature, which is also some societies in our culture tend to be collective. This is also taking it to the next extreme, but
Right.
that's where that concept comes from is a society that's not individual in any way, shape, or form. A society that has assumed creativity for the sake of their own individuals, for their society, for collectivism, things of that nature.
Yeah, and even in the concept of maybe like a Star Trek, you're using it from the perspective of the president of the sentient ship as being a human, and everybody seeing the human as a
Right.
lesser form, and everybody's just going at each other
Right.
constantly on this ship, as we thought was going to happen anyway.
Right. The idea behind the story, and we're going to find out in issues 4 and 5, is that she was put into power or given the ability to lead because every species felt because she was younger and she was a woman and she was human, she'd be easy to push around or intimidate.
Okay.
So the idea that they pushed was that she was a consensus choice of everyone because everyone felt they could probably manipulate her the way they wanted to. And the first couple of issues, her finding a way to stand on her own and be like, I am the one who's in charge. She really knows why she was put in power to begin with, but she also knows she's strong enough to be a leader, and it's her finding her voice, her ability to stand on her own 2 feet, and really taking charge of the ship in the first couple of issues, and then that's going to play out later.
Right. And even in the concept of them all being in this ship, they are escaping from something.
Yes.
And that is called the Big Rip.
Yep.
Now when you're detailing this in that fashion, it's not like a colony ship that's just traveling the cosmos and just has a multiple array of species aboard. They're obviously trying to get to a destination to where they can be safe. Now, if you
Right.
could describe the Big Rip as
Okay.
far as like almost the big bad in this entire comic, I
Right.
would say.
Basically that's sort of like in the peripheral, the doom that faces everyone, the adversary in the background. It's obviously some astrophysics, pseudoscience, but basically the idea of the Big Rip. The idea there's dark energy, the dark matter. Dark matter is pulling the universe together, dark energy is pulling it apart. Now the idea is that at some point in our universal history, dark energy is going to overwhelm dark matter, and eventually everything will be pulled apart, including the atoms, until there's literally no energy left in the universe, and the universe basically just dies silent in this silent, quiet whisper.
Right.
I took that idea and moved it a little bit more quickly, more urgently, and instead of a little whisper, these are going to be the explosions as the very atoms of things start pulling apart and causing explosions, other things like that. So the universe itself is dying. Obviously, I'm taking some liberties with the idea of the science, just like I'm taking liberties with where the heroes are heading. The idea of this is that the universe has a boundary to it. That is, though it seems infinite, there actually is a finite boundary to our universe. And at some point, if you can get there, if you can get that far into the universe and travel fast enough, you can escape our universe. And so
Uh,
never exists after, which there is something that exists after, and that's the ending. But I can't explain it. I don't want to describe it too much because it would ruin how we're going to get there. But there is a boundary. They are going to escape. And the question is, out of these survivors, out of these people on the ship of 50,000 individuals, we're only going to look at maybe 15 to 20 actually making it out. So it's going to be a whole lot of death. It's going to be a whole lot of it's basically going to be like a massive massacre for the remainder of the series until the final ones who have made it through the obstacles that the series is going to put them through get
right.
to the end. And who these characters will be that make it to the end, some I definitely know because the characters I'm definitely going to hold on to, and a few I'm leaving it open to see which ones make it the most interesting, and which ones, as the story tells itself, make actually do seem like they would survive. And it's not going to be all who you think, because a lot of major characters are dying, including at the end of the second issue, we're already going to kill off one of our main characters.
Oh my God. Yeah, and we already see that kind of happening at the end of the first issue.
Yep.
That more so like the pull through for a lot of people on this ship. There was only 50,000 individuals on this ship to begin with, and
Yep.
that was like the prototype. So it's more so like a survival of the fittest
Yep.
as we get there. And I mean, in the beginning of issue one, they start to have all these mediations, and the mediations are all chaotic.
Yep.
They're all sitting with all their heads of species, all their heads of council, and they can't agree on anything because
Right.
they've all been raised in a certain way, whether it's primitive, faith, uh, science built, or better yet, the voice of reason, which happens to be President Lamar.
Right. Every species in some level view themselves as being the
Right.
best, right? And right and closest to perfection. The clones view themselves as genetically perfect. The acolytes view themselves as spiritually the best and strongest, and because it's their god, they are the chosen people to survive. Um, the Kadakians believe themselves to be a warrior race, the strongest, so they must be the ones who survive. And every species has the link, views themselves as being non-organic. They're technological, most advanced, so they must be the ones that are most important. And even though they're working together and they're forced to work together, each one kind of does view if all the other species die, they're kind of cool with it. You know what I'm saying? It's like
Yeah.
it's okay to let the others just
Like
drop.
even Alpha and Beta, it was like, well, you're just basically a clone of me, so I should stay on the ship.
Right, right. Like there's even between the two of them who are supposed to be absolutely identical, because one is technically the prime of what's left of the clone genetics, use themselves as being superior. The other one's the redundancy,
Right.
and one has to live its life believing itself to be the redundancy.
Oh,
And once again, that plays out as well. Yeah, but every species, I think, just like on Earth, every culture views themselves as being on some level superior to all the others.
it's true.
And and let's face it, as a cultural society, If somehow something would happen on Earth, we'd all protect ourselves first and view the others as expendable. That's kind of how we are towards each other. And I kind of feel like take these aliens, stick them in a spaceship together, they probably view it the same way.
Yeah, because everybody's pretty much hardwired towards their own beliefs.
Right,
That's how they were raised, probably on their planets, and they only see one side. They put the blinders on, and that's how they go.
right, exactly.
Definitely. Now, Salah's character,
Yep.
when we're talking about him, he's almost reminiscent of the trees from Lord of the Rings.
He's a space ant on some level. Yes, I proudly ripped them off a little bit.
I kind of figured, but he's also reminiscent of how they speak to
Yeah.
President Lamar, almost in mediation, because they look to she's looking to him for counsel,
Yep.
and more so often than not, he's like, I know you'll make the right decision.
Right.
I believe it's not that I believe in you. It's like I'll just I'll ride the wave with you.
Right. And you ask a question of whether Salah is doing it with the best intentions. Does he also believe in his own way that he's kind of maneuvering her? But for the most part, far as she's concerned, he's the counsel. He's the only one that's giving her a proper shot at being leader and is respecting her as the leader of the ship right now.
Mhm.
He is calmer, he's wiser, and he would view it as sort of like the ants longer lived. He kind of has a bigger view of things. However, though, when we get to the second issue, he also says some things that she can't stand with either. His
Mhm.
view is also somewhat collective, which is the ship is what matters. Those who are on the ship matters. Whoever on the planet is too late. Ditch them. Let's go. And
Mhm.
she has to stand her ground and say, because she was a soldier, you don't leave anyone behind. We can't just walk away from our crew who are on the planet. So even with Salah, she's standing her ground and saying, I respect you, but no, you're wrong here. I'm going to make the decision. I'm going to be the one who takes the responsibility of having saved these people. And the cost of that is going to be grave as well. But sometimes the right decision, the right thing to do, doesn't always work out the best in the long run.
True. And even in the initial mediation in book one, the argument was more so about nourishment and how much
Yep.
food actually like left on the ship. And it almost had me agreeing with everybody else aside from President Lamar, because ultimately she got buckled anyway.
Yep.
It, she asked Link, who of course is her own uh I guess we could call him a robot if we
Yep.
want to say that. But she asked him for calculations as to, you know, how much nourishment do we have left on our path?
Yep.
And he was like, I can't even calculate it, because we're going if we're going to the edge of the earth through basically almost to the end of this universe. I'm not sure by how fast we're going and how often how much the rip is following behind us as to how much we have left. And everybody's just looking at her like, see?
Yeah, because like I said, I mean, she's a human. She's limited in her ability, and the link is all math, right? It's all this is scientific. This is what we can prove and what we can't prove.
Hmm.
Anything that is almost on some level, um, almost like a Vulcan maybe would be as far as only
Yes.
logic matters. And because the universe potentially we don't know how far it is to the end, it's impossible to then determine how when you're going to get there.
Mm.
Maybe or maybe even if there is an end, which is all only theoretical at this point, but it's the last ditch hope. Yeah, the link isn't much help either. And keep in mind too, the link doesn't eat anyway, so he doesn't give a shit. They don't give a shit. If once again, if they were to ever have a total chaos on that ship and a rebellion, the link would probably be most okay.
Yeah.
The ship, they don't breathe. They don't need to eat. Um, they are infinitely the potential to live infinitely amount of time because they are more or less, even though they have a metal construct of a body, they basically are just a mental signal that travels through these bodies that are constructed for themselves so they can kind of interact with everything else.
Right.
They don't have the same concerns, so they don't give a shit. It's like I don't know, it could be, could not be, whatever. They're not going to be pals of Lamar because it's not really their goal to, and that's also going to play out later on as well. Because let's face it, what they feel is important is not what everyone else who are organic is going to feel that's important.
Mhm.
So that's going to come into conflict as well. And keep in mind they are on a technological ship, so things are going to play out interestingly with them over the next 3 or 4 issues.
Got you. So President Lamar being a human herself, and of course being the overall leader of this abundant arc. Um, when she's looking at it from her perspective, maybe I haven't seen it yet, but as far as like the humans that are on the ship, she has to deal with every other species on there, but you don't necessarily see her yet, basically sticking up for the species that she belongs to.
Well, there's definitely some of that too. The humans are majority of the crew are going to be human.
Right.
They do control the ship, but at the same time, you'll find that the species don't mingle with each other. And the bigger concern, when you're President Lamar, you kind of have the assumption that the humans are automatically going to be on your side because they're you. Even
Hmm.
though, as we find in our own civilization, that's not necessarily the case. But you just kind of have the assumption that they're going to be on your side. So her view is that it's these other six species that are your problem.
Hmm.
However, things always change.
Right.
And there's also some people who are not going to trust her. And many people too may not even want the other species on the ship to begin with because you can't trust them either. So President Laura has a lot on her plate. She has a difficult situation as both a leader and a diplomat, but at the moment, her ability to be a diplomat is the most important job she has right now. Because if these six other species don't get along, they will tear the ship apart.
Mm. And I find that to be, of course, the conflicts that are going to be moving forward, because when we're looking at kind of like the impending cliffhanger that leads into the end of issue 1, that whole argument of nourishment and the needing to land on a surface planet in order to gather any type of supplies that they need to continue their journey, they end up, and to be honest, they were all surprised. So
Yep.
they saw this planet laying in wait, and they were like, okay, it's actually warm here. It's not a dead planet at all.
Yep.
It's just sitting here floating on the edge of the universe. If there's any opportunity, the opportunity is now.
Yep.
So they choose a pod to actually like explore the planet so they can gather supplies and get back to the ship.
Yep.
And they don't even know what's there, which is so Star Trek. You know, it's just land on this planet we know nothing about, and just try to figure everything out.
Yep.
So when they get there, of course, the Getagations, they're of course they're gung ho. They're like,
Yep.
we get there, you guys are going to follow us. We're the hunters. You guys gather once we finish cleaning everything up, and then we'll get back to the ship. Ultimately, they they crash in because the atmosphere is just crazy.
Yep.
And this is where our journey begins, because the decisions that are happening back on the ship with President Lamar, as far as what to do now, because the big rip is probably like maybe like an hour or 2 hours away. And
Yep.
then even also the aspect of what to do with the crew that just landed.
Yep.
It just makes for like almost like the what ifs are now starting to happen and fall into place.
Well, that's what Lamar's point of view was. You don't take chances. The goal
Yeah.
is to get out of here. This is what we do. Any slowdown, any stopping, any march into the unknown is not safe. You need to play things safe and let's just get moving. It's the others who are thinking themselves, due to maybe just arrogance,
Hmm.
we'll survive. We'll get more food. Um, no, it doesn't. There's nothing that's going to impact us, right? We're going to say, we're strong enough to deal with anything.
Right.
And her job, and she's like, no, 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 no. We're going to get screwed. Let's not do this. And they're going to find out that yes, they are in fact screwed. The ones who land on that planet. It's not a safe planet.
Hmm.
And the problems on this planet is actually going to radiate through the rest of the series
Mm.
because there are things that are there's something about these aliens that's not going to just go away when they leave the planet. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, they're very like the species that's on that planet are very like Chronicles of Riddick, Jurassic type characters, and they have no mercy. So like the impending cliffhanger on that episode, of course, is them being surrounded by multitudes of these aliens that they've encountered on this surface world, and it's pretty much like, yeah, you thought you were doing the hunting, but no.
But we're actually going to find at the beginning of the second issue too is that they also are a different perspective on society. They are a nihilistic species. They believe in survival of the fittest to such an extent that the only reason to survive is to be the most dominant species. Thus, everything needs to die. Everything does, and
Mm.
they're even happy with the rip. They know about it. You can see stars dying in the distance, and they're okay with it because once the rip happens, everything dies. If they're the last ones left, they do kind of win, right? They survive.
Right.
Their species was the last to survive. But the thing I'm gonna let's keep in mind is that I'm trying to think how much I should give away. There's something going on with these aliens that are going to linger with the ship. They may not just be the aliens that are the problem.
Oh, okay.
Without giving too much away, what they're going to do, the actions of the second issue are going to cause massive problems for the ship later on when they leave the planet.
Mm.
So there's a lot going on in that second issue. That's the reason why we're there. And it gives also a perspective of another species, right? Even though I said there's only seven left in the universe, this one technically is the eighth, for as long as they're going to be there for, and they are okay with everything just dying. Everything, the competition ends when everything dies. That's kind of their viewpoint. The only way you can rest is when all life is over.
Right. And it's funny because like I ultimately reading that first issue, I was thinking that there was like going to be a different perspective on the Big Rip itself, almost in the way of like Neo in the Matrix. Like this has happened before, it's going to keep happening ever so often from there on after and there on after again. Almost like the fall of Zion has happened 17 times. This is only, you know how many chosen ones there's been? It's like
Right. I mean, it's not every species, is that worried about the end. I mean, the humans are like, hey, and those aliens are like, get the hell out of here. We need to survive this. And they're kind of like, no,
yeah,
this is good. This is the way it should be. We can finally rest, as a species for survival because all the competition is over at this point. And yes, and they're, for lovers of the movie Aliens, they're going to have very much an aliens like battle in the second issue.
got you. Now, is there more? Is there going to be like, I guess, uh, a flashback sequence to where how they all ended up on that ship in the first place?
Actually, that's a great question because issue 3 is actually the beginning of the flashback. Um, the second issue ends with a murder of a major character.
Okay.
But it's a question of who murdered him
Okay.
or it, depending, I guess, on your perspective. And the issue 3, 4, and 5 starts the backtracking as they start to try and figure out who the murderer is. You start backtracking to why the character would be murdered, and you find that everyone on the ship did have a reason to want the character to be dead. So it's a
Mhm.
question of which one actually went ahead and did it, or which ones went ahead and did it. And so 3, 4, and 5 are going to be the flashback to figuring out how this all got to where they are.
Mm. And for a interesting character to always add some a character of faith and somewhat of religion aspect to the bunch. The acolytes of the devout, adding of course a faith-based character set is always a concern in a sci-fi movie. They see themselves, of course, just like everybody else, as being like the dominant figures and everything like that, but they also see themselves as an extension of themselves because they believe in the higher power. So uh, I see just the ritual aspect that they had on the ship and what their intentions are, and I'm already seeing villainy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I took a cheap shot or not, but they're not going to be good people.
I
Uh,
didn't think so.
Anytime you do have people who are so devoted to an idea, um, they're gonna have um, some hypocrisy there,
Hmm.
and they're hypocritical. They're not the holy ones they pretend to be, and
Right.
that also plays out as one of the major issues that are going to plague the first. And as the 3, 4, and 5 is a backstory, it
Yeah.
goes back and forth from the present to the past, and what's going on in issue 2 and what's going on with the acolytes are going to connect, and it's going to be a major problem. And yeah, it's what happens with fanaticism, and I'm not a fan of fanaticism.
Right. Yeah, it's funny that they basically are still the way that they are, even though they have all these other sentient species on this ship, and not the and I see what they're trying to do, but it's a fantastic way to actually like build the story around just all these dynamic characters. And
Yeah,
especially President Lamar just trying to like kind of just curtail around everybody's perceptions of what this ship should, how the ship should be run.
right. And with the acolytes too. I mean, let's face it, people in our world, they view themselves, or especially if you're Catholic or Jewish or Muslim, you believe you were made in God's image, right?
Mhm.
Despite how many other cultures there are in this world, you still believe it was your image that God, is your representation of God's image.
Mhm.
And if we ever met another alien species, we probably would still have a huge portion of our world saying we're the ones who were built in God's image, not ignoring the fact that God created would have created an entire universe with
Right.
infinite number of potential species and planets, everything else.
And
It's
looking at everything else as an abomination.
right. It's kind of arrogant to think in a universe this big, potentially in a multiverse this big, we are the only ones. We're the ones made in God's image. There's an arrogance there, and I'm kind of going to explore some of that in the series.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Now, of course, beings how putting this together and wanting to do sci-fi, is there any other genres that you felt like you've wanted to like dive into?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in the horror and superhero genre. There's a comic book I wrote with my father called Nightmare Patrol, which is a team of monsters that are kind of superhero slash horror. There's an idea I have in my head that's kind of superhero slash horror as well, that I'm going to work on maybe at some point in the future. There's a lot of my stuff is in the horror genre. There's a comic book I'm also working on, a series called Malik Reigning Devil, which is about an angel that was told by God to kill the devil.
Mm,
Um, and the rule is when you kill the devil, you become the devil,
wow.
and he becomes the ruler of hell with a huge vendetta against the god who sent him there. So issues 1 through 6 is him rebelling against God, through hell, then purgatory, then heaven, to get revenge on being forced to basically occupy hell. And it's a good, once again, it's action horror, but it's a lot of big ideas, just like Terminus has a lot of big ideas that I'm exploring.
Right. Nice. Now for Terminus, the creative team, who helped you with this?
Brad Shipp is the artist. He's fantastic. He did the first one. He's doing the second one. He's hopefully do the third one if all goes well. He's wonderful. Todd Tashioka is the letterer. He's also very cool. He did some work for Image as well, for lettering. And yeah, that's the team, right? And apparently, we may be getting a colorist for the second issue. So the second issue may have color. Haven't It's not 100% yet, but it looks like second issue is going to have color because I found a really good colorist.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't even mind the option of grayscale because there is a dynamic to it. I believe I've had a few people that I've talked to that kind of like going in that route. They honestly feel like it's better for them. It brings out a lot more of their characters rather than what color could. Do you
Yeah.
feel the same?
I think there's value in both. Part of me wants to put out just a colored version of an issue, see if that becomes more popular than the other versions. Of course, every time you do that, you got to sell enough to, because very few printers will print less than 25 copies. So if you sell less than 25 copies of the color version, you still got to pay for $100 to make them all published, and that's more money and more expense. Um, I don't know. I'm not 100% certain. I think some black and white is fantastic. Like Walking Dead was a fantastic black and white comic book.
Oh yeah.
I'm not sure how much of the divide of the audience, or how many. Okay, there's always a reason why someone's not going to back your book. All
Hmm.
right, there's millions of reasons. Any small reason is a reason why they're not going to do it.
Hmm.
So the question is, while we have backers, are we losing X number of backers for not having color, or versus how many are we keeping because it's black and white, a grayscale? And it's a hard thing to figure out because you never know. No one ever messages you and goes, "I was going to back your book, but it's not color," or I'm backing your book because it's black and because it's grayscale." No one ever just tells you. You kind of have to make a guess.
Right.
So I'm thinking, is it, if I put a book out there and that book is significantly more popular than the grayscale, maybe that's the way to go. I don't know, I'm still weighing the cost benefit analysis of color.
That's actually an interesting dynamic because a lot of people don't get constructive feedback as to why they are
Right.
not following a book on Kickstarter.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. I mean, I had some people feedback. Some people absolutely loved it. One person said, it's okay, and it has me interested by the next issue, but it's only okay. And I kind of messaged him back like, okay, what part didn't you like about it? And out of curiosity, because I'm always curious, always like having feedback, and they never responded because I don't know if that came off as like a hostile, like, what didn't you like my book? No, but I'm like, I'm literally curious, like, because
Yeah.
that's kind of getting feedback, whether it's positive or negative, is gold. because
Yeah.
it's finally someone giving you some sense beyond yourself on the quality of your book. I mean, the artist loves the book, but the artist is also being paid. The letter also loves the book, he's being paid. I love the book because it's my book. And obviously there's a lot of people who do like the book, but you never quite know the why of they like or not like something. And it's always that feedback is golden when you can
No,
get it.
absolutely. Absolutely. So how many days we got left in the campaign?
Last I checked, there's 15 days of this interview. We're halfway there.
Already
We're
crossed the goal. So congratulations.
for $350 from the first stretch goal, which is keychains with the image of the Terminus ship on there. At $2,000, if we get that far, there's going to be a backup story of Thraxus, who's one of my favorite characters. It'll be an 8-issue backup story. But 15 days, I would like to get that first stretch goal. So $350 at the very least. If someone wants to be a producer if at the $450 low, please do so. Getting this me over the hump. But it's 15 days is the target at the moment.
Excellent. Excellent. So, Jeff, I appreciate you doing this with me. I hope that everybody gets their hands on this book and it has a very interesting thought process of how this storyline is going to go, just like I did. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely. So, Jeff Haas, Facts Project, thank you for being here. And go get Terminus right now. There's, like you said, 15 days left on Kickstarter. So we have a little bit of time to get this man to where he needs to be as far as like the goal. The goal's already reached, but we need to get him farther than that. All right. So for myself, Facts Project, everybody on board, feel free to get this. We are out.